Hello, Internet. Welcome to the stream. I'm Chris Reynolds, Senior Developer Advocate at Pantheon. A couple months ago, at a side event called AltCtrlOrg at WordCamp Europe over the summer, a team of developers and WordPress leaders announced FAIR, Federated and Independent Repositories, a package management system that could replace theme, plugin, and core distributions from WordPress.org. Today on the stream, we'll be talking about FAIR with one of its lead developers of the project, longtime core contributor and director of product for Altus, Ryan McCue. I'm going to click the button to join me on the stage. Welcome to the stream, Ryan.
Thanks for having me here. It's good to be here.
So, for anyone who doesn't already know who you are, like I do, and who hasn't worked with you for many years, what do you do?
That is a great question. So, with my day job, I am director of product at Human Made, working on Altus, and previously was director of engineering. I've been at Human Made for about 11 years now, I think, so quite a while. And then in the open source space, I created the WordPress REST API, led that project through initial development, merge into WordPress core. I also created the requests library that WordPress uses for all external HTTP requests. I used to maintain SimplePy as well.
That's a
Contributor
flashback.
for about yes, it's I've been contributing for about 20 years to the project, so almost the entire life of WordPress. So it has been a while, kind of being around. So yeah, keep busy.
Yeah, and for today we're going to be talking about FAIR. For folks watching at home who might not know FAIR in depth or who might not know what it is or how it would affect them, what is FAIR and how does it work?
Great question. So FAIR is an acronym, as all great names are. It stands for Federated and Independent Repositories. So the FAIR project is a kind of fairly broad project. We have a few kind of different problems to solve as part of that. You already kind of highlighted a little bit of the background of where that comes from. But we are a organization under the Linux Foundation. So we have our own kind of foundation that we're working on creating, and we have a fairly large project with a large number of contributors, as mentioned, announced at AltCtrl. The FAIR project itself and the practical kind of aspects, we have a plugin that you can go and install that has two kind of key parts. One is what we call technical independence, and that basically makes your WordPress site independent of WordPress.org, so that kind of can't be affected by anything else. It allows you to choose different mirrors for different kind of aspects, and it also kind of fixes some functionality actually that was a little broken before. The second part is the package management. So for plugins and themes and other types of packages we might have in the future, it allows you to go and get those in a decentralized way from whatever source they might come from.
And why do we want things to be decentralized, Ryan?
Great question. So, as many people in the community and who are kind of keeping up with news will know, there was quite a lot of controversy kind of around the end of last year, particularly around WordCamp US. So, actually, probably about a year ago now, where basically WordPress.org has existed for a long time as a kind of resource for the community. And I think the community kind of understood it as being, it's part of the WordPress project, and it's kind of, probably part of the WordPress Foundation and run for the benefit of all. And I think what everybody kind of really discovered, for the first time last year was that it is not part of the WordPress Foundation. It is a personal website. Run by the project lead, and the access to that can be restricted or changed at any point, both for web hosts who are using pieces from there and their users kind of part of that, and for developers as well who are publishing things there. We saw WP Engine had their access restricted entirely, which I think was a bit of a shock to many hosts. And we also saw that their kind of plugins were taken over. And although some of that was restored later, that had to be kind of effectively forced by a court. So there's an ongoing legal case in California around this as well. So, all of these things really pointed to we have a huge kind of single point of failure for WordPress. WordPress is vitally important to the web, right? It is 40+% of the web. It is too important to leave to a single person or a single entity kind of controlling things. So, from that point, we, many of us in the community who have been involved for a long time, we started thinking about, okay, how could we kind of solve this? And, how could we maybe, think of, solving both the organizational problems as well as the technical problems. And then really since kind of the start of the year, we've been working on that. So we were doing that in secret up until WordCamp Europe and AltCtrl, where we kind of fully announced that we were part of the Linux Foundation, so on the organizational side, and that we were shipping, that day effectively, the technical independence work, and here was our roadmap for the next kind of pieces.
And it's not just WordPress.org either. I mean, obviously at Pantheon, we do WordPress and Drupal and Next.js and other sites as well. And Drupal.org is also the hub for all Drupal modules and Drupal core and things like that too. So their package management is different. They use Composer. It's a little bit, more, you could decentralize it if you really wanted to, but it's still mostly coming out of, when you do a Drupal / module name, it's coming from Drupal.org. So Fair, it's not just a WordPress specific project. It's really my understanding of it, doing the research and being involved a little bit as I am, is that the goal is that any project could use this as a protocol to manage their packages in a decentralized way.
Exactly, yeah. So we're designing effectively a package management protocol that anyone could go and implement. So whether that is in, WordPress itself, which is what we're kind of working on initially, or whether it is in Drupal, in, Composer. Composer, for example, actually is pretty hard-coded to Packagist, which is a
Yep.
repository kind of run by a single entity. It has a lot, kind of better ways to add additional repositories, but, those aren't perfect either. But also, this could be used by any sort of package management. You could imagine building a kind of user-focused app store, for example, for a mobile device with this same protocol. We're trying to make that sort of generic. That's part of just building a good protocol, is making sure that it's adaptable. And then we're also building in some WordPress specifics. We're designing this basically as a kind of open specification, very similar to, say, a W3C or an IETF kind of specification. So, quite formal in that sort of regard, and also working on the implementation for WordPress at the same time. But, we think that this could benefit, people far beyond the WordPress community. We're interested in having conversations with kind of other ecosystems and people who might be doing things there. And I know that there's already been a little bit of chatter in other Linux Foundation projects, for example.
That's awesome. Well, we've been talking for a lot. I've got a couple WordPress sites, and I kind of want to just go through what's different. So I have a couple sites. This one, we'll do this one first. That has a Fair plugin installed. I've installed it as an MU plugin so that it's like just there and running in the background, and people don't need to worry about it. It's actually, this site is using this fork that I created for opening this up to potentially doing this as a Pantheon thing. Like, do we want to build Fair into our default WordPress upstreams? And so this is using the fork that I created as the default upstream. So this one is using just sort of the default settings. This one over here is, so one of the core things that I noticed after the announcement was that there is an option to specify the default repo. So on one of these, I've got api.wordpress.org, so all the updates are coming from wordpress.org. The other one I'm just not, and so it's coming from Aspire Cloud, which is the mirror that Fair is using out of the box. And kind of looking at the difference between the two, and there's not a lot to see. There's like, I can kind of see words shifting, and I deliberately left this one using the fair avatars as opposed to Gravatar, so that it was a visual difference, because I think that's the most obvious thing to me as a user of what the difference is. Talk me through like what I could find and what I could expect in my WordPress dashboard that is sort of unique to fair, or what where the sort of distinctions are.
Yeah, so we very much kind of designed a lot of the technical independence work so that it would be very unobtrusive. Users will not really notice. You will see in the footer of the page on both of those, where the version is shown, it will show you, hey, we're serving updates here from Fair Package Manager and from Aspire Press. It's worth noting as well, the Aspire Press is kind of merging in and joining as part of Fair. We've been working very closely together since the start of the year, and we're kind of properly bringing all the kind of contributors together. So Aspire Press kind of components, mainly Aspire Cloud, will effectively be part of our larger organization and will be a working group. So the changes that you'll see to your site are fairly minimal for the most part. As you mentioned, the avatars are I guess, fairly obvious one. So by default, WordPress includes avatars powered by Gravatar, Gravatar being a commercial entity run by Automatic. We wanted to make sure that there was a viable alternative included out of the box for that. So we instead have automatically generated avatars based on your username, or for comments based on comment name, and in your user profile you can go and upload an image to replace that. So a lot of people have been asking for this for a long time.
Yep.
There are open track tickets and things like that. It's certainly something that I know others already ship, so we decided to add that by default. So with a lot of the pieces that we've changed, it's not just about, oh, it's an alternative. We actually also want to make things better as well. We want to add additional kind of options. You do have the ability, as you're showing right here, to still use Gravatar if you would like. We want to leave the option there for users. Certainly Gravatars can be useful, particularly where you're interacting with, maybe a lot of people commenting and you just want to have them have a default nice avatar if there is one. The fair avatars are there as an option as well. And then you can still kind of upload as well.
Yeah, I know one of the things I'm not seeing here, which I think would be different, is WordPress core has other fallback options. In this case, it's just the sort of like blank slate fair avatars and Gravatar. Are there is that something, probably not before 1.0 and probably not before like other solutions are integrated, but like the Wavatar and like monster avatar stuff, is that stuff that where it like generates a random thing based on like, I guess, the hash of your email address or something? Is that something that might come in a future iteration at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we considered a little bit. A lot of those defaults come from Gravatar, so they're not
Okay.
generated by your WordPress site, they're generated by Gravatar. But that said, I think about half of them are based on open source implementation. So it is
Mm-hmm.
something that we could do in the future. I think what we also kind of looked at was, some of these options are maybe more focused at, maybe an individual user has a blog, for example,
Yeah. Yeah, for
but they
sure.
don't necessarily get usage across, business or,
Yeah.
larger sites and things like that. And, the priority really here was we want to have an alternative. We do have the ability to kind of configure bits of Fair and change things around. So, like you can change it back to Gravatar. There's a few other kind of options that are available as well. So, at the end of the day, we want to give users choice and we want to give a good out of the box experience for something like this.
Yeah, I know. I know. I mean, this is such a small detail, but providing out of the box the ability to upload avatars is not insignificant. We have both worked on many sites where that is like a top priority. And it makes sense to not want to sign up for a third party service, uh, give them your multiple email addresses, associate them with images of yourself and any other sort of person, like there are a lot of reasons why you might not want to do that. There's a lot of reasons why Gravatar is handy. Pantheon uses Gravatar in like our dashboards. I think even like lots of other things out in the ecosystem use Gravatar because it's handy, but it's really valuable to have that as a alternative.
Yeah,
What
for
else? What
sure.
else? What
For
else
sure.
can I find that's fairish?
So, one that is a little hidden is whenever you publish a post, you'll see on, I think, the writing settings screen, you can see WordPress will send, it might be on the general. Oh, no, no, it is, sorry, it is on that screen. It's just called that update services at the bottom. I forget how they name these things.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the in your case, you have your site set as private, and so it's not listed in search engines and things like that. But many people will be aware when you have your site marked as public, if you publish a post, it sends a ping, and it sends that off to a service called Ping-O-Matic.
Hmm.
Ping-O-Matic is a WordPress Foundation project. And the idea originally of Ping-O-Matic was whenever you publish something, we can let all the search engines know, hey, you've published a new piece of content. However, it's quite outdated. So there
Yeah,
are only
that's been
four.
around for forever.
Exactly, yeah. So there are only four services that Ping-O-Matic sends off to. Of those four, three no longer exist, and the fourth is blo.gs, which is wordpress.com. It is owned by Automatic. So effectively, every time you publish, it is only telling wordpress.com, hey, I published a new post. That doesn't improve any search engine kind of indexing, for example, and it's potentially also a privacy concern. So we changed that out and we replaced that with a new implementation based on a standard called Index Now. Index Now is an open standard created by a variety of search engine kind of operators. I think Bing is probably one of the largest. There's also Yandex. It's kind of an open protocol that others can kind of sign up to. And the idea there is effectively the same, but this is actual search engines that subscribe to this. We have also had conversations with people at Google about this, and I know that there's kind of some ongoing conversations there. But the way that this works is, it's actually functional, right? It's actually going to tell engines to update it. When we first started digging into this, we figured, oh, we'll just take all the services it pings off to and bring those in. And it turns out none of them work anymore.
Hmm.
So we replaced it with something, completely functional instead.
Yeah, I it's been at least a decade since I've even had to think about Ping-O-Matic before I read the sort of project spec and the things that were replaced under the hood. I was not aware or had not thought about the things that Ping-O-Matic like sent things off to. I know FeedBurner for one for sure because I used it all the time is has been dead for a long time. I didn't know that three out of the four were dead and that the fourth one was automatic. So yeah, I definitely having a functional alternative to that is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there are a couple of other cases where we looked at this as well. So, for example, your WordPress site will run checks to check that you are both running the latest version of PHP or a secure version of it, as well as it will also check your browser.
Mhm.
And the way that it does that is actually that it sends your user agent off to a service called Browse Happy, which again is part of the WordPress Foundation. Um, but that is actually kind of a concerning privacy violation, right? If you have a customized user agent, for example, nowhere inside WordPress does it tell you it's sending a user agent off to a third party. That's actually kind of concerning, particularly for those of us in Europe, where things like the GDPR can kind of apply. The other thing is the backend code for this, it's part of the WordPress.org code base, is very out of date. I think it's about 7 years old. So it's sending your user agent off, and it doesn't check actually if you're running the latest version of a browser. It checks, I think, Firefox version 14 or something like that. I think we're up to like 120 now. So it will basically never trigger. What WordPress.org does do, however, is collect analytics on those user agents that are coming in, and it stores those in a MySQL database, basically, that is run as part of WordPress.org. Now, again, as we found out last year, WordPress.org is not a WordPress Foundation website. It is a personal website. And so effectively, we are sending, every time you open up your dashboard on any WordPress site, you're sending your user agent off to somebody else's personal website. So aside from it, being a privacy problem, it's also just not functional. So we decided to replace that. And so for anybody that's built a project with something like Webpack, they might be familiar with a project called Browsers List. That basically pulls data automatically on, hey, what are the most used browsers? What are the supported browsers, etc. We have a regular expression that we use that is from that project. We bake it into the plugin, and that checks, is your browser up to date? So no data is ever sent anywhere else. The check is done entirely on your server. And we just update that inside the Fair plugin on a regular basis. So it fixes the check, and it also kind of fixes that privacy concern. And similar for the PHP version checks, we actually talk to php.net directly rather than talking to WordPress.org.
Yeah, that's and that goes into stuff where like WordPress is doing stuff that you didn't even realize that it was doing. Like there's a lot of things that are like that they're if you have a healthy-ish, I guess I would say, site on a modern version of PHP with a modern browser that you would never even notice that it was doing things stuff like that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've kind of made a lot of these little tweaks, I guess, across the board. And then I guess the biggest place where we are changing things is actually in the package distribution, right?
Right.
So package is the generic term that we use for plugins and themes. It could also apply to other things in the future if there were other types of add-ons. So maybe block patterns or something like that could in the future be a type of package. So with the version that we shipped with 0.3.0 was our first public release. That shipped alongside AltCtrl and our public announcement. That allowed you to specify a mirror for the packages that you're pulling down. So you kind of mentioned before, that is configurable. You can set that to api.wordpress.org. You can set it to any other host that has a WordPress.org compatible API. Aspire Cloud is the default for that because we have been kind of working closely together. They already have that mirror running, but I know that there are other hosts that also run their own internal mirrors, so they can point those off directly. So that's kind of the first phase of the package management, is just the technical independent side. The second part is really what we've been working on since that announcement, and the kind of broader picture of what we're working on, which is the fully decentralized kind of package management.
Yeah, because I think that like obviously like I've got a couple updates that I can do. The best case scenario is if I click on this button, I see nothing because it
Right.
just works, and it doesn't matter that it came from AspirePress or WordPress.org. I now have the latest version of Akismet or whatever my plugin is, and that's the way it should be. But we were talking before with the latest version of the Fair plugin. There's now a new way to install plugins. Besides, you can obviously upload a plugin. You can find it in well the browser sort of thing, the directory. Notably, when I go uh, when I go to the add plugins page, the plugins that I see right off the bat are different. Um, uh, Someone could notice a pattern, I suppose, or suspect a pattern between what shows up here uh, versus what is absent from this screen. Um, but uh, but yeah, there's a whole new thing. So tell me about this. What is a DID?
Yeah. So the big picture idea of Fair effectively is that rather than having a single central repository where all of these plugins and themes are hosted, what if we could talk directly to other repositories? This is a pretty familiar thing in a lot of other package managers. You mentioned before Composer. Composer allows you to set up, additional repositories that you can speak to. It's not so much of a thing generally in user-focused software, although it is becoming so with a lot of the kind of EU regulations in app
Mm.
stores and things like that. But what we realized was, we had this big problem where we had reliance on a single central entity. But actually, in practice, the WordPress ecosystem is already decentralized. If I go and buy a premium plugin
Yeah.
from, say, Yoast.com or Gravity Forms or something like that, they will offer me a plugin to download and upload to my site because those premium plugins can't be distributed via WordPress.org. Um, and once I have those installed, great, I can then go and update directly from there because those plugins change the way that kind of WordPress works internally to update from those. What I can't do though is install plugins for the first time that way. So we realized if we could take the way that that system already works, standardize that, and then build some way to discover that ecosystem, we would then be able to hook that ecosystem all together and kind of build a new directory. But where that directory is not coming from a single site, it's coming from the network. So the functionality that we have shipped in 0.4.0, which we shipped I think about 6 weeks ago, introduces the first concept of this, which is direct install. So this brings in the concept of DIDs, which are decentralized IDs. They're a way of doing decentralization while still having something to refer to. And so if you already have a package DID, you can go into direct install and you can enter that in here and then hit view details. When you do that, you will get the details of that plugin. Now, this is not coming from WordPress.org. It's not coming from Aspire Cloud. It is coming directly from that developer's website. It's coming directly, kind of over that decentralized network. At no point does this ever talk to, the kind of central big service kind of thing. So DIDs are the fundamental technology that powers other decentralized networks, including Blue Sky, notably, and their AT Proto. It's also been used in kind of decentralized technology with the blockchain and things like that. It's a W3C standard, and there's a number of kind of methods that are supported. So the direct install is basically, our first kind of foray into this, where you can enter one of these DIDs and install directly. Once you've installed, you'll get updates directly from that vendor as well, and it will never touch, a centralized server. So it won't touch WordPress.org, it won't touch Aspire Cloud, it won't touch your host mirror. It will only talk directly to that external service.
So to sort of recap, I've got Fair. I'm using Aspire Cloud. If I go into one of these, I install one of these plugins. That's going to be coming from the Aspire Cloud mirror. That's great. If I go over here and I enter a DID, this is coming directly from Andy. Hi, Andy, in the audience, and it will always be coming from him and his wherever he's hosting that from.
Exactly. And one of the important things about decentralized IDs as well is that they are separate to where it's actually hosted. So they are kind of abstract, like IDs basically. So let's say that today I have created a little plugin, I'm hosting it on somebody else's repository because I don't want to have to run it myself. And then business takes off. My plugin is very popular. I want to have a premium version. I now have a team maintaining it. I want to move it somewhere else. DIDs give us the ability to have data portability. So you can imagine a future where, maybe WordPress.org joins into this system. A big vendor could develop their plugin, grow it organically over time, and then whenever they want to, move that onto their own hosting. I think for people like Pantheon and any other host, the thing that we think about quite a lot is, how do we make sure that people are able to run their businesses and scale and grow, right? And what tools are available for them for using the open web and hosting things themselves. And this really kind of fits with that. It allows people to move around and kind of take control of their own destiny with these sorts of things. So it's really important that we have that decentralized aspect and we have that kind of data portability built in as well.
It seems like it makes things a lot simpler too. I'm thinking about like of days of yore where I have, Delicious Brains Migrate DB Pro, and I have to go to their website to download the zip file and then upload the zip file, and then maybe I can get automatic updates. But instead of even needing to do the download and upload dance at all, if I had just a string of letters that I could plug in here, then I wouldn't need, like, that just makes my life simpler. Just give me the thing to put in this box, and then I click on the button and I hit install and I'm done.
Exactly. So, that is already possible today, with what we've already kind of shipped. And, I think it's really important to us that that sort of fully decentralized aspect, that's kind of core to the entire flow. But, as the WordPress community and as WordPress developers who've been around for a long time, a thing that we think about a lot is how do we make sure that this has great usability for people who are less technical, right? Let's say that I am running a site, I've started a new business, and I want to have people contact me. I want to go and find what are the best contact form plugins. Now, there are a number of great free options, but I might want to consider premium options as well. Right now, there is no way within WordPress
Right.
Creative Admin here to see all of my options side by side. So I
Yeah.
can't make a choice between, maybe I want to spend, $500 on this premium plugin that sounds really good and solves all my problems, or the free, version over here, maybe only solves a couple of my problems and, etc. I can't see all of that at
Right.
once. And this was a usability problem that we realized is actually kind of caused partially by the decentralized nature we already have. So we can now stitch that ecosystem back together. And so we do this through a system called aggregation. Aggregation basically goes out and finds all of these IDs that exist, collects them all together, and then that can kind of take over the featured screen or the popular screen, and it can also power things like search. So that's the next phase of what we're working on here, because copy and pasting the IDs is great, but ultimately for users, they want to search for contact form and see all of the options. So that's what we're kind of currently working on with version 1.0. Aspire Cloud is effectively morphing into that sort of kind of combined discovery aggregator. We're kind of building off of that kind of work, and so the team's working very quickly and heavily on that. The other things that we are doing are also thinking about, okay, in a completely decentralized world, how do you deal with safety aspects? Now that anybody could go and publish a package, how do you make sure that that's still safe? So those are the sort of things that we're kind of thinking about.
Yeah, and Brian from the chat says, I want to filter plugins to only those that have a GitHub I can contribute back to, and I'd love other metadata like has unit tests. This sort of gets into the realm of some of the moderation stuff that I know exists. Maybe the folks on that are watching don't know exists. And I know you've got some a vast array of graphs and diagrams that you have readily available. Maybe talk about like the different sort of layers, because right now I think it's what we have today, and I think this has been said in other sort of fair spaces is not a representation of what it could and will be in the future. So we could kind of jump towards where those sort of like distinctions and layers maybe are.
Yeah. So something that might be useful actually is if I show you the previous slide here,
Yeah.
which is kind of how this network works. So I already kind of talked a little bit about this. Basically, we have our kind of individual repositories. We also have our discovery. Analytics is kind of an extra piece that sits off to the side. So when we're thinking about this decentralized network, how do we handle those kind of safety aspects, and how do we make sure that people kind of stay safe no matter where they are? Because safety is super important to us. We do not want to create a system where the immediate thing that happens is everybody's site gets compromised or something like that. For myself, I'm on the WordPress security team. The kind of head of the WordPress security team, as well as on my team of work. We're thinking about security constantly. And And so, there's the security aspects, but there's also the kind of individual moderation of, things like how do we make sure that, there aren't impersonation of
Yeah.
different entities, or, obviously in the premium plugin world, there are nulled plugins as well, some of which are not, legal, for example. So how do we make sure that all of that's possible? So we kind of realized about partway through our design of this decentralized system and thinking about how we could standardize it that this is actually very similar to the way that Blue Sky have actually built their existing infrastructure. Their existing kind of flow between all of their entities is very similar. So they have a concept called a personal data server, very similar to our repositories. They then have relays and app views, which are very similar to our kind of discovery aggregator. And then they've got this really kind of interesting approach to moderation, which they call their stackable approach. So the idea here is that you can have layers of moderation on top. Because all of our packages have fully unique IDs, they have those decentralized IDs, no matter where they're hosted, we can uniquely identify them. So we can have these built-in layers on top of this. So the way that this kind of fits into the system is we have our full kind of system here, and we basically just add an additional kind of layer on top of that, which is called a labeler. So labelers can set things like, hey, this is safe or this is unsafe. They can also do things like, this is, we've checked all the licenses on this. Maybe we can check the SBOM, for example, and make sure that it's fully open source. We can check, does this have any vulnerabilities in a vulnerability database? The way that these labelers are designed, as mentioned with the Blue Sky kind of example, they're designed to be stackable. So users can opt in and kind of run multiple of those if they want. Our plan effectively is to offer at least one of these ourselves. So we will have built-in moderation effectively with kind of a built-in, can't really turn it off sort of service. And additionally, as we're building this out initially, we're going to have cautious federation. So very similar to a lot of these other federated servers. While we're still building this, we are going to be very cautious about what we kind of allow to be listed in that directory and how we kind of aggregate those in. Our kind of hope over time is, that does go fully open and, we've kind of solved all the problems. But while we're still building it out, we're going to take that quite cautiously.
Yeah, a couple of use cases that I've thought of over the course of the last several months in the context of the different layers or labelers that could be put in place. One of the first things I thought of was, a company like PatchStack that has their own vulnerability API database. They could say, okay, we've got a service now that integrates with the FAIR protocol so that when you are doing searches for plugins, the plugins that you actually get in your results are filtered by those that don't currently have vulnerabilities. That's a thing that would be a pretty easy win for them, I think. Another context that I've heard a lot in the EDU space is I am a university. I'm actually part of a bunch of different universities. We don't want our individual university site admins to have full control over everything that exists in WordPress.org or Aspire Cloud, but we do want them to have the ability to install plugins that they need. Could we collectively decide this is like an allow list of plugins that we have vetted and we approve of, and just say, thumbs up, yay, and then provide that so that, individual site administrators could just go in and say, what's the best form plugin, and it's like a list of 2 or 3 or whatever that we know are vetted, as opposed to a list of a million things that are in various states of development and compatibility and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the important thing for us is that this creates an ecosystem and it creates a brand new thing that people can offer. So there is a multitude of kind of capabilities that could be possible here. I think that includes both free and paid services. I think that there are, commercial opportunities for companies that might want to offer, potentially paid security scanning services, or, maybe, I don't know, a sort of gateway review site could say, hey, look, we're going to only label these things as these are great for beginners, so that somebody who's just starting their WordPress journey can use, one of these great plugins that exists, and it's going to work out of the box for them. It might not have the full power of, every solution that exists, but, as a new user, it can be quite overwhelming if you're looking at the directory right now and you see 80,000 plugins, right?
Yeah.
And as we're bringing in the premium plugins, that expands even more. There are so many plugins that are not on WordPress.org.
Right.
So maybe having a filtered view that is just, hey, here's the beginner's pack. Here are the things you're probably going to need for your site. There's interesting other things that we might steal from our friends at Blue Sky, including things like their starter packs that kind of say, hey, look, here's just a list of recommended things.
Right. Yeah. I see Lovecash has a comment. How does FAIR ensure the security of package distribution? How can I verify that I'm receiving a secure, untampered version of a package during transit? That's a really excellent question, Ryan. I defer to you.
It truly is an excellent question because it is something that we've thought, very deeply about. So the decentralized IDs that we mentioned before, each decentralized ID has what are called signing keys associated with it. Signing keys are cryptographic keys. If you are super up on your cryptography, they are ED25519 keys. And those basically say, hey, look, for this ID, here are the keys that are valid to sign, anything that's published by us. So we can then guarantee, that a repository, when it publishes the zip for a package, it can be signed with that key. And now we have a very strong link between this ID has verified this specific zip. Now that actually is something that's not possible today in WordPress. So WordPress did some experimentation with signing packages from WordPress.org. There is actually a key built into WordPress right now that expired, I think, 3 years ago. So the experiment didn't really go ahead. But the fundamental architecture and the code is actually already there inside WordPress to check these keys. So every time that you download a package, we can check, this is exactly what you're intended to get. But because this is actually safer than the version that's on WordPress.org, it also opens up new possibilities. So a host, for example, might want to save bandwidth. So they might have a cache that they run internally that caches all of these, package zips, etc., and only, just uses their local version. This is a thing that's very common in enterprise, and there's already tools like Artifactory, for example, that do this. But we can now do that fully safely because those packages are still signed. So you can still verify, from an independent source that those packages haven't been tampered with. And something that we're looking at as well is also signing the metadata. So you couldn't even rename a package without it kind of being signed. There's also a system of kind of ways in which those keys can be rolled. So, good practice in cryptography generally, or at least public key cryptography, is to roll your keys probably annually or something like that. So we're thinking about that aspect as well, and how that's kind of built into the protocol. So a lot of it kind of comes from the DIDs that are kind of published.
Lovekiss asks a follow up. Where is the key stored? Where does all this stuff live? And I sometimes I like that's a difficult thing for me to wrap my brain around too. Like where does all the stuff come from?
Yeah. So this is going to depend on each vendor. As they're running their repositories themselves, they will have to decide where they're going to store their private key material. The public key gets published underneath their DID. And so that's what we then use to verify things. As to how they store their private key, that's up to them. I think that I would like to see repositories store those with things like hardware security modules and etc. Certainly, I've already kind of been thinking about implementing that myself for some of the things that we do at work. But it's up to each kind of vendor. So they can kind of choose. And that's one of the really kind of key parts of this entire ecosystem is vendors get the right to choose. If you are a plugin vendor and you're publishing something out into the world, you're maybe building a business on top of it, that could be a very serious business. That could be, literally your livelihood. It is up to you, and you want to take on that responsibility for managing those sorts of things. Now, we can provide guidance. We can provide lots of tools, including we have some open source repositories that will let you run your own kind of repository for packages. but you can also kind of take on some of those responsibilities yourself. So, a lot of this will come down to as well, things like what is the kind of trust that you have in your own systems, and what's your threat model, and etc. We open up the possibility for all sorts of things, and so that's why making sure that the safety is in place, is really key as well. It's possible that we could have a label that says, "Hey, we've verified that this repository uses hardware security modules and other forms of really strong encryption for their private key material." We could layer that on, and so then people could opt into that. So it opens up those possibilities.
And I know that you mentioned 0.4.1 was, or .0 came out a couple weeks ago. .1 was a fast follow. 0.3.0 was the first sort of public release. I know that because I have been watching that 1.0 is on the horizon. What are the things that you want to get in place before you have a full like 1.0? And then what are sort of the things that are like things we want to hit after we hit that 1.0 milestone? Like where are the lines in the sand?
Yeah, good question. So, if I flick forward a little bit, this is basically what our system is going to look like once we have created a lot of it. So the idea is that there will be repositories that are independently hosted by vendors. We will probably provide a repository very similar to WordPress.org, so that if you're a new kind of plugin developer, you just have 20 lines of code that you want to get out there into the world, then you can use our repository for that. We'll have a moderation service, as I said, that will be built in, provide those safety guarantees by default. We'll have our discovery aggregator as well. And then there will also be an analytics service. Our plan for 1.0 is that we will have the discovery service kind of complete. And we have the open source repositories already available to kind of run. What we are doing at the moment is kind of converting or transforming Aspire Cloud into the first kind of discovery service. That basically stitches these things together. Because we are doing this cautious federation as we start, we won't have solved all of the moderation issues in a fully decentralized way just yet. So we won't yet have this fully decentralized moderation node running, and we won't yet have the full labeling system. Those will come after 1.0. The same is also true for the analytics service and for the kind of big repo. So the repo that you can run yourself, we call mini fair repo, and that is because it's designed for I'm a vendor who publishes maybe 1 to 10 plugins, and I just want to kind of self-host. At some point, we will also create, I guess, a mega repo, and so that will be for hosting tens of thousands of plugins. That we won't have in place for 1.0. We're taking these in stages to make sure that we kind of get each aspect right, but we are planning ahead with all of these. So with 1.0, we will also have the specification and the standard for how moderation will look. We'll also have documentation on how all of these bits kind of come together. Some of this documentation already exists. And so our plan basically with 1.0 is to have enough in place that now we have this fully decentralized installation process as well, where you can say, hey, I want to go find a solution to my problem. But because of that cautious moderation, still kind of keeping that controlled and safe.
And taking off my Pantheon hat for a minute, as a user, as a consumer of WordPress, why should I care?
Yeah. The kind of fundamentals of FAIR, I mean, a lot of this started because we were concerned about some of the problems that exist. And that's kind of diffuse, right? Those aren't necessarily problems that are happening today for every user. They are problems that could occur in the future, right? If you're on a host and that host suddenly ends up in the bad books for some reason, then you could get blocked. Now your site is no longer functional. That can cause real problems, particularly when there are security vulnerabilities or things like that. But that's a long-term kind of thing. And so it's also something that hosts have been thinking about and, have come up with various kind of, workarounds and solutions for, including things like mirrors. Those don't fully solve the problem. And so the problem still could occur for actual users. We want to protect them, from that before that happens. So that's one aspect. The kind of second one is really that, like, we want to bring the full power of the WordPress ecosystem to all users. Right now, they're only getting a small slice of it. In the past, I've been working with WordPress for about 20 years at this point. I would say in the past, um, I don't know, 8 years or so, the commercial market has really, really improved and taken off, far beyond what it was before that. And there is a massive, vibrant community and ecosystem in the premium and kind of commercial space. And users really don't get access to that. And that actually hurts WordPress overall, right? It hurts our competitiveness with closed source solutions like a Wix or a Squarespace or maybe a Sitecore or an Adobe. It really just like hurts all of the users of WordPress who they might change CMS entirely because they don't have a great solution to their problems. So we think that we can provide all of that. We think that we can also integrate a better experience for buying some of these things. Right now it's very diffusive, like how do I even get a premium plugin in the first
Yeah.
place? We're going to build into the protocol a way to say, hey, look, here is the site that you go to buy it, and then copy and paste your API key and you're done, kind of thing. And that allows us to then bring premium plugins fully into the fold with all of that as well. So that's what we're kind of working towards in that regard.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on. Before we sign off, where can people find you on the internet? I know you maybe not so much these days, maybe more so than I'm aware of, are at least one of many people that are sort of chronically online. Where can people find you and have further discussions, and where can people learn more about FAIR?
Great questions. So for FAIR, you can find us at fair.pm. That's PM for package manager. Nice and easy to remember. That currently redirects to our GitHub. However, a little sneak preview. We are launching our website very soon. Probably within the next week. No pressure, Joe. You can head there. You can also join our Slack as well, which is at chat.fair.pm. And then you can chat with all of us there. If you want to find me on the internet, my website is rmcue.io. McCue has one M, two C's. Everybody always misspells that. You can also find me these days on social media on Blue Sky because it's decentralized and it is not a terrible website like Twitter has unfortunately become. And my username there is the same as my website, so at rmcue.io.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on. It was a pleasure talking about FAIR. Looking forward to all the things that are coming in the coming months and hopefully years of the project. And yeah, we'd love to have you back and talk about what's new in when there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would love to come back. Thank you very much for having me.
thanks a lot. And for everyone else, we'll see you on the internet.
Thanks all.